This month's episode of Paranormal Heart is brought to you by Nodakian Studios. If you're looking for a beautiful piece of stoneware pottery, check out Nodakian Studios at etsy.com/shop/Nodakian Studios. And also check her out on Facebook at facebook.com/Nodakian Studios, where you can see updates on where she's going to be, as well as giveaways. Go check it out.
Welcome to Paranormal Heart, a place where people can talk about their paranormal experiences. With your host, Kat Ward, along with a special segment, Oddities with Jon Mallard.
Welcome, folks, to the August episode of Paranormal Heart, your monthly paranormal podcast. A new episode is released on the last Sunday of each month at 6 p.m. Eastern on Podbean. You can also find Boo and I on YouTube, sparkradionet.work, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Paranormal Radio, TuneIn, and each Sunday on IamDarkWaters.com at 6 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to show your love and support of the show by simply clicking like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, or follow on Podbean or anywhere else you listen to us. If you have any topics you'd like to hear or have a guest in mind, or you yourself would like to be a guest, it's easy to contact me. Just drop me an email at paranormalheart13@gmail.com. Before I get to my next guest, enjoy Oddities with Jon Mallard. Let's hear what odd things Jon has for us this month. Over to you, Jon.
Hey, oddballs. Welcome to this month's Oddities. Strange facts about an odd world that are very, very true. There's a lot of strange people in the world, oddballs. It's true. I happen to be one of them. But you know, there's just strange folk altogether out there. Just a few strange entries about strange people will be my Oddities this month, who do strange things in this strange world. Have you heard about the carpetbagger? A 48-year-old man identified as Giorgio T. goes to New York City bars and lies down on his stomach on the floor because he likes it when people step on him. He even carries around a rug so he can attach to his back along with a sign that says, "Step on carpet." Giorgio explains, "When we were kids, one friend wanted to be the doctor, another wanted to be the carpenter, and I wanted to be the carpet." Next weird person. "Some people like baseball better than football," says Michigan teenager Kyle Critchbaum, "but I like vacuum cleaners better than anything." Kyle loves the sound, feel, and look of vacuum cleaners, as well as the act of vacuuming. Kyle's love of vacuum cleaners is purely platonic, he says, but he just can't get enough of vacuum cleaners. In fact, he has more than 200 vacuum cleaners and vacuums his parents' house 5 times a day. I kind of would like to have him as a foster child. That'd be awesome. I foster. You guys should foster too. Oh, more strange people. A 37-year-old woman in Stockholm, Sweden suffered from moussophobia, an unreasonable fear of mice. Her 59-year-old ex-husband knew that and wanted revenge after their bitter divorce, so he went to her apartment and pushed 19 mice through her mail slot. She's now being cared for in a hospital, say police. The man was arrested on harassment and animal cruelty charges and has demanded that all 19 mice be returned. Wowzer. Mauser. That was a Ninja Turtles joke. Thomas Borkman, have you heard about this guy? Was arrested in Cook, Australia after he broke into a woman's apartment. The woman woke up to discover that Borkman had glued his face to the sole of her foot. That's right. He glued his face to her foot. It took surgeons 3 hours to separate foot from face. Police said that There's just so many jokes I can crack here. Police said that the act had some sexual significance. Well, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but I don't really see what the heck that guy was into. But I will say this, these people are all oddballs. They're your oddities this month. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Back to you, Kat.
Folks, this episode is very intriguing to me. It's a topic I've never delved into before, and I hope you find it as fascinating as I do. My next guest has television and film appearances, which include Ancient Tomorrow and Mysteries of the National Parks, Yosemite, to name just two. He has also done consulting for television shows such as NBC's The Blacklist, which is a personal favorite of mine. He has studied alchemy and travels the world researching sacred places with local vortex experts. Please help me welcome Dan Shaw, the Vortex Detective. Hello, Dan. Welcome to Paranormal Heart.
Thank you very much.
I'm really happy that you're here because, as I mentioned to you earlier, this episode will kind of fit in with a past guest of mine, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But before we get to the questions, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where we can find you?
I'm at danshaw.com and at vortexmaps.com, and I'm the Vortex Detective. I've spent my lifetime looking beyond the obvious, and I haven't had quite the paranormal experience that Dr. Perodin did. I can't say that I myself have personally gone through a supernatural gateway, but I've spent my life in search of and researching paranormal vortexes and traveling and meeting people who are experts on the sacred sites in their region.
That's really fascinating to me. Not a lot of people that I've heard on other shows or people that I've encountered actually know much or talk a lot about vortexes or vortices.
Well, everybody has a unique perspective on these paranormal vortexes. Everybody comes to the research from a different angle, and I came from a unique angle. I actually came into what I call geomancy or earth magic through the avenue of studying extraordinary healing and alchemy. I didn't come into paranormal vortexes because I happened to fall through one and make it out the other side. But I feel guided to this research, and I was gifted with some maps which are visionary maps, vortex maps, maps of the geometric relationship between these paranormal places. And I published those, and I've been doing the research and at the center of this research. And my emphasis is very much on electromagnetics and the geophysical energies, the unity of our human energy field with the energy field of the Earth.
So would you say that, because I'm not fully understanding vortexes, would they be the same thing as ley lines? Or is that something completely different?
I would say like several blind men feeling different parts of an elephant.
Yes.
I think we're looking at different parts of the same phenomena, or the same phenomena from different angles. So you could think of vortexes as being perhaps where ley lines cross. So the ley lines are, and that's L-E-Y, ley lines are straight lines, usually rifle straight lines, connecting sacred sites. And there are other types of energy lines that are sinuous, perhaps. And you could think of the vortexes as being like acupuncture points and the ley lines as being acupuncture meridians. To me, that's a very, very close analogy. So yes, people are often familiar with ley lines. I use the term vortexes, but I use it sometimes in a very broad way, sometimes in a very narrow way, where there's natural vortexes everywhere in the air, in the water. When I'm talking about vortexes, I'm talking about places that contribute to paranormal phenomena. And there are places all over the planet, not just the Bermuda Triangle, let's say, but vortexes all over the planet. These are places where you could say the veil between worlds is thin, where the goblins and the fairies and the orbs and Bigfoot, cryptic creatures might be coming through or traveling through.
Do you think this is how, you mentioned Bigfoot, so many people, we can't find Bigfoot per se, and people say that he can change, he's traveling, he's a dimensional traveler. So do you think perhaps maybe this is how they're traveling? If this is how they're doing it.
I do. I think we have a kind of an electromagnetic blindness for the most part, and that just because we don't see beyond the visible spectrum doesn't mean other creatures don't exist and perceive beyond the visible spectrum in other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. So I like to think that if we had electromagnetic vision, we would be seeing the energy of people. We might be better able to see through that veil into that other dimension, so to speak. So I like to say there is no other side.
Sort of like infrasound, some animals can hear it, and we just don't have the capability of hearing it.
And how much of that is learned or miseducation due to maybe electromagnetic pollution, maybe that if we let our hair grow to its full length, we would be even more sensitive antenna than we already are. But our human body is an antenna. In fact, everything is an antenna. Everything is giving off and receiving frequencies. And so as a geomancer or as a vortex detective, what I'm looking for are places that affect our physiology and our consciousness, and the unique signature of each place and how it might affect us differently, different chakras, you might say.
Well, as I told you, I told Dr. David Perodin, a past guest, that I would be interviewing you today, and he wanted to know if I could ask you a question. So this is what he wrote. When I encountered the dimensional traveler, he told me that he was heading south the next day. That remark sticks with me. He was very pleasant, and his comment didn't imply south was hell, but also not sure if it was simply as him going to the southern United States. So when a dimensional guide tells you that he's heading south, is there some specific meaning to that? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
That could be a bit of a puzzle piece there. I would say I might ask a follow-up question. Is he heading to geographic south, or is he heading to magnetic south?
That's interesting.
And I say that because the magnetic field of the Earth is not well understood, really, even today. It's very dynamic. We all exist in this churning electromagnetic sea, you could say. There's daily variations in the Earth's electric and magnetic field, and seasonal variations, and it appears to all appearances the magnetic north and south are highly important in geomancy, in feng shui, in the study of vortexes, in our own human energy field. So we have a south pole in our own human energy field as well.
So no, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say in alchemy, we have a principle that as above, so below, or that the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. Yes, so just there is a certain unity, a relationship of identity between the human energy field and the planetary energy field. So if we find chakras in our bodies, we should expect to find chakras in the Earth. If we find a north and south pole in the Earth, we should expect to find the same in our body.
I've never heard of that. So are vortexes tied to the land only, or can they be opened by some other means, and if anybody would want to open one?
Very mysterious. I don't claim to have all the answers, but
yes,
I've looked at a lot of different researchers, and I am looking at vortexes which are, now hypothetically, you could say there might be vortexes which are entirely natural, yes, and vortexes which are entirely man-made, in theory. But I think in fact, vortexes are some combination of natural and then with some human intention, some human influence. Yes, so these vortexes they have their own biorhythms, let's say, and they are in cycles of charging and discharging. And when we come in to a place, to an energetic place, a vortex, we affect that place whether consciously or not. And if we are aware of the possibility and we have intention and we have will, then we can affect how that place is operating. And that's our goal as alchemists or as geomancers, to understand the nature of the place so that we can work with the nature of the place, work with the way the materials want to work, and to be able to influence those, to help harmonize them if they're out of harmony.
Deep stuff. How long have you been studying this?
Well, I would say I began studying extraordinary healing tools and techniques around 1986, 1987, which was around the time of the harmonic convergence. There was a planetary meditation called the harmonic convergence, and I was studying with a group of healers and just waking up spiritually myself at that time. And I wasn't studying specifically vortexes, but within the next couple years, in the universe, or I like to think of my guides and angels, had kind of delivered up this gift to me, this idea, these visionary maps. And I've been focusing on those ever since. And it does touch on every other aspect of the paranormal, I think. Touches on astrology, it touches on cryptic creatures, touches on psychic abilities. So it does bring me into a lot of interesting places.
I can imagine. So since you've awakened spiritually, have you gotten any psychic abilities, or did you have any before?
Well, I had my first psychic experiences when I was about 7 years old. And I didn't know what to think of them at the time. I certainly couldn't talk to anybody about them at the time, really. But I began meditating and having psychic experiences just on my own. I found a way to meditate around age 7. And it wasn't until about age 21 where I was really had all the right triggers lined up for me, and I began studying with spiritual teachers.
I have such a hard time meditating. I lose focus or I fall asleep. It's just not easy for me at all. Do you have any advice on how someone like myself could perhaps have better techniques?
I have a very broad definition of meditation. For me, meditation is any kind of one-pointed focus. So people are perhaps familiar with the idea of using a word, a mantra, repeating that as a point of focus, or looking at a candle flame or a geometric pattern, a mandala, as a visual single point of focus. But you can also do moving meditations, walking meditations, or Tai Chi, or for some people, cooking is their meditation, or dance, or chess, or whatever it might be that brings you to that one-pointed concentration. So for some people, it's a matter of kind of expanding their perception of what is the meditation for them. Maybe it's painting or gazing off into the distance or whatever it is for you. But we're training our mind, hopefully training our mind for that single-pointed focus, or what even might be called even the open focus. But I would not prescribe a type of meditation to you or to anyone until I had a sense of, until I kind of assessed what's going to be a suitable type of meditation. Walking meditation is often something children can start very young, but it's maybe not everyone's path either to meditate in a certain way.
I never even thought that there'd be other, like the walking meditation that you referred to. I always thought of the one that everyone pretty much knows, where you're either lying down or you're sitting, and that's the one that I always had a hard time with. But yes, I can definitely understand how the walking meditation, where you're just focusing your mind on whatever you're doing, because I have done that several times. I'm sure other people have as well.
Sure. So if you identify a place in your area that seems like a highly energetic place to you, because there's one nearby, whether it's maybe it's a lake, a mountaintop, a waterfall, field, meadow, whatever it might be, that is a great place to practice your psychic abilities, whatever those might be. And if you're wanting to practice, let's say, meditating, at that place you can focus on the sound of the wind, the sounds around you. You can do a listening meditation. You can maybe focus on the colors around you. I recently came across a technique that was new to me that is apparently ancient, where if you have trouble focusing on a single point, then you might imagine yourself with 4 different objects around you. Maybe each one is a different piece of fruit, let's say. And so in your mind's eye, you can shift your attention from one piece of fruit to the next. And that way kind of gives your monkey mind something to do. But you focus on a single point kind of as long as you can, but then you move to the next.
Well, yeah, so your mind doesn't wander like mine does so often when I'm trying to do these things. Well, that's interesting. I'll have to give that a try. Yes, several times. I love the wind. Fall is my favorite time of year. So when it's that little, in the evenings when it's a little windy and some people say it sounds spooky. I just love sitting there and just listening to the wind. I absolutely love. It's so calming to me.
Well, there's a kind of magic which is scrying, or let's say divining from the sound of the wind, hearing the sound of the gods in the wind as an oracle. You could do the same with the ocean waves, the sound of a waterfall, kind of a white noise. We can hear the divine voice in that. The Maya built some of their rooftops. They built in what's called a roof comb, kind of an open latticework structure, where the sound of the wind coming through creates that kind of eerie sound that they would use to listen to the spirits, really.
I'm originally from the east coast of Canada, so the ocean. I now live in Ontario, and I really miss the ocean. That was also a peaceful place for me, just to sit on the beach, listen to the waves, listen to the wind and the birds, and I really miss the salt air, and that was very, very relaxing.
Well, every element of your environment is part of what I call the vortex effect. So whether you're on a mountaintop or you're in a valley, whether you're in a desert or you're at the coast, these things all have a unique electromagnetic fingerprint or signature to them. If you're at the coast, there's that layer where the waves are breaking, where the air is very full of salt, and that is electric in a different way than desert air. Yeah? And when you put your feet in the sand, you're putting your feet into essentially quartz crystal.
Yes.
And when it's moist, then you're grounding your electrical field. The seawater is salty, so it's carrying electrical currents within its different layers of temperature and salinity. There's different electrical currents flowing in the ocean. And where the ground has moisture in it and minerals, the earth itself, soil has electrical currents in it. So there's all these different electrical components in the environment that I'm interested in as contributing to the vortex effect, but also these other elements that we've been talking about, the color, the smell, these other elements of the place, the sounds, all contribute, in my opinion, they contribute to the vortex effect because, again, it's these stimuli, acoustic stimuli, light, sound, color, they're all affecting our aura, our consciousness in a certain way. So I do focus on electromagnetism, but I don't pretend that explains the whole vortex phenomena. There are subtler levels of energy as well.
Are there physical signs of a vortex?
You can recognize a vortex even if you're not psychic and you don't have psychic sight, or if you don't actually consciously feel it in your body. Yes, because you can see how the animals are behaving and how the plants are growing. And if you look carefully at the, let's say, rabbit trails on a hillside, those will tend to follow the energy lines. If you are at a vortex which is, let's say, negative or not beneficial, because I believe that they can be either beneficial or not beneficial, you might find that you don't see a lot of warm-blooded animals around the vortex. You can see from maps and air photos, because I've confirmed the research of another researcher, vortex researcher named Nick Nelson. Nick Nelson has identified a number of vortexes which are 54-mile diameter circles. And you see these on even the crudest maps, because the mountains, the roadways tend to follow the mountains and bodies of water. So you find these circles and half circles with a diameter of 54 miles. And just to mention one, I'm just going to mention Bend, Oregon, as the center of a 54-mile circle. And when you look at Bend, Oregon on a map, you'll see it's surrounded by mountains in every direction that are 27 miles distance, and it's the center of a 54-mile circle. And I have an idea that might be because 54 miles is a kind of a harmonic or fraction of fundamental measurement of the Earth, and that is the circumference of the Earth, the measurement around the Earth through the poles. The polar circumference of the Earth is a near exact multiple of 54 miles. And so I've written a number of books and booklets, and I have one called U.S. Vortexes 54 Miles Wide. And if your listeners will email me at ask at danshaw.com, send me an email, I'll send you a free copy of this booklet called U.S. Vortexes 54 Miles Wide.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Just you've really opened my eyes here. There's so much information here that I didn't even know anything about.
Well, it's the electromagnetic world in which we live is something that people are generally oblivious to. Unless they're in a lightning storm, they're not really thinking about how electric the air is. But I propose that, like bees, birds, and fish, humans are sensitive to these magnetic fields. We have magnetoreception. We have the mechanism. Seems to be this magnetic mineral, magnetite, that occurs minute amounts, but that occurs in every cell of our brain and in our sinuses. We have this magnetic mineral, magnetite. And so that does seem to be a possible mechanism for humans to have magnetoreception, just like birds, bees, and fish.
I wasn't aware that we had magnetite.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much hematite that's magnetized?
I'm not gonna venture that exact definition, because I don't want to give you the wrong definition.
Fair enough.
I'm not. Yeah.
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 So you were talking about positives and negatives of the vortex. So do some people actually get sick around them if you have the negative ones?
Yep, you do have to be self-aware when you go into an energetic spot on how you're responding to it. You have a biorhythm, and the place itself has a kind of a biorhythm, and different people are affected differently at the same time, and a person may be affected differently at different times. So when you go into the spot, you may feel elated you may be like, oh, I've got that mountaintop feeling, yay! Or you may feel like, oh, I'm feeling a little nauseous. And I have spent 3 seasons leading tours at an attraction called the Montana Vortex, which is one of 8 genuine vortexes around the U.S. that are open as tourist attractions. And at the Montana Vortex leading tours, I did once have a person throw up on my tour. A young boy threw up on the tour, and I joke, I hope it wasn't my tour that made him sick. But his grandfather tells me that his grandmother had the same response to the vortex energy. So some people won't even come onto the property. They can feel it before they even come on. It's more often women than men who seem to be very sensitive to magnetic energy.
Why do you figure that?
I'm not quite sure, but the energy does seem to be very turbulent at places, and only a few places. When we're thinking of a vortex, you could almost think of like two spinning whirlwinds, not just one. Yes. First of all, we're oversimplifying in any number of ways. So just for the sake of drawing a mental picture, we're talking about a spiral, but it's perhaps not a 2-dimensional spiral. It may be a 3-dimensional spiral. And really what we're talking about is more dimensions. But if you can think of that spiral as being like a slice of a torus or a donut shape, that spiral could be happening in any number of orientations. It has like an X, Y, and Z axis in space. And so if you have 2 counter-rotating vortexes, and let's say these are electromagnetic vortexes, where these 2 things, they may be, if they're counter-rotating, then where they're tangent, where they touch, that's going to be nice. They're going to be going in essentially the same direction. That makes sense. But if they're both rotating in the same direction, where they come together and touch, now there's going to be like a tornado, hurricane, the jet stream in the atmosphere touching down to Earth. It's going to shear off. There's going to be these extreme shearing forces and vortices coming off of these 2. So following this analogy, if we're in this churning electromagnetic ocean, it's all vortexes all the time. Sometimes you might find like the perfect wave or the perfect storm, let's say, where forces kind of, they coincide to create a very turbulent storm on a small scale. So that's the picture I imagine when somebody like your Dr. Paradin ends up passing through a supernatural doorway.
So would you say this doorway it must be a 2-way door, so to speak?
Some people will come back to tell about it for certain, and I think more people come back and they never talk about it at all. But it's important to share the experience. The more you share about it, the more other people open up. I encourage people who haven't had a paranormal experience to try this experiment, to just actually make up a story and tell a little white lie. It's maybe a big white lie, to just like a social experiment. Maybe choose a confidant, a friend or 2, and tell them that you've seen a Bigfoot or a UFO or whatever it is, kind of testing the waters, because it's like 9 times out of 10, that person will come back and tell you, they had a lucid dream, or they had precognition, or they had a brother who, didn't get on a plane because they had a vision, whatever it might be. It's way more common than we think.
It sure is, because I'm also a paranormal investigator, and more often than not, I've had so many people tell me, I don't believe in that. But there was this one time, which a lot of people in the paranormal, this always happens to them. There's always, quite a few people that will say that, and they just open up. It's just amazing because they know that other people have had this experience.
And being as I'm the Vortex Detective, people do feel free to open up to me, and then they should, because it'd be very difficult to surprise me. In fact, part of my origin story is that at age 14, I was sitting in the backyard of my parents' home, my home at age 14, looking up at a dark night sky, and a UFO, a craft, turned on its lights, flashed its lights, seemingly for me, to me, seemingly, and somehow even at that point, I was not entirely surprised. So, if an alien were to manifest, or a Bigfoot or some cryptid creature were to manifest in front of me right now, yes, I'm sure I would be surprised to a degree, but your listeners should feel free to share their stories freely.
Yes.
I guess is what I'm saying. I've pretty much heard it all. I've got a little booklet too called Letters from the Vortex, where people describe their experience, and they are of every sort.
Oh, that would be interesting. Where can we find that book?
It's on my website, and it's got 15 different stories in it or so, and I sell it for a couple dollars, or sometimes just give it away. Is
it an ebook, or is it a hard copy?
It's a downloadable ebook, so I can send out a link for people to download it, and it doesn't cost me anything, and it's a pretty short thing. It's definitely an eye opener, though.
Yeah, that would be very intriguing for me to read. I love hearing about various experiences that people have had, because I'm pretty sure there's experiences that I haven't heard of yet.
Well, they're just really of every description. Somebody may be just dozing off to sleep in their armchair in their living room and find that they're having a conversation with some researcher across the world who's being coy about identifying themselves and such and such.
Wow. And how many people did you say that, how many stories in this book?
Oh, I think something like 15 stories in there. And again, if your readers, when your readers email me, ask@danshaw.com, I'll send them a free copy of the Letters from the Vortex book.
Oh, thank you.
You bet.
So if the vortex is in fact a doorway, if someone is entering and leaving, could they be stuck in between the entrances and the exit, do you think? Would you have any thoughts on that?
I imagine it's got to be the very rare individual who comes out the other side. I think of going through a car wash with those spinning brushes going through, and I think that there's probably like a highly turbulent point in time and space, electromagnetic turbulent point, and it's got to be nearly impossible, I would think, to retrace your steps back through that. Now, if I had the option of stepping through a supernatural doorway, I'm afraid that I would step through, because I do feel like I've missed a chance in the past. So I think I've already answered that question. I guess the proof is in the pudding, but I think I've pretty much already made an agreement that if that ship shows up, I'm getting on. So I've warned my friends and family that might happen.
Yeah, if I disappear, I found one. Yeah. So do you have any thoughts on when people are going missing without a trace? Perhaps they found one?
That's naturally going to be my position. Now, I'm not going to say everybody who disappears has gone through a dimensional gateway. However, everything that I have learned in my studies points to the truth of these supernatural gateways, and that they may activate, let's say, on their own cycles or by accident. But they may be subject to human manipulation. So, and I have, again, accounts from witnesses, firsthand witnesses who I believe are credible, describing just exactly that. I'll point out that there's this pilot named Bruce Guernon, Guernon, and he describes that experience flying in the area of the Bermuda Triangle. And we have this Bigfoot researcher named Matthew Johnson, Dr. Matthew Johnson, and he seems very credible to me. And he describes a device which was creating some kind of an electromagnetic pulse and opened up some kind of dimensional gateway where these Bigfoot beings were coming through. And I've met the fellow who developed the device, and he also is a very humble, credible man who is clearly having difficulty integrating this new information and also, coming to terms with his relationship with his wife over this new perspective on life. So this is a spiritual emergency for some people. It's who they are risking their credibility, their closest relationships, sometime their career, their professional career, and so it seems they have no motive, really, every reason not to reveal their paranormal experiences, and yet they do. So that, to me, lends to their credibility. And often they're the first ones to add some detail that actually detracts from their own credibility. And I actually, in my own story, there's elements that, when I tell my story in complete detail, there's details that seem to detract from the whole picture, and people only reveal those little cracks in their story when they really are being truthful, I think. Right? If that makes sense.
It's really sounding to me that Dr. Perodin's experience, that he did enter some kind of a vortex and that there was a guide who did help him through. It's just sounding more, it just makes more sense now.
I'm actually getting the chills, which I feel is a good sign. And I want to mention, he mentions like sawdust in the air, which is, that's so beautiful, because often people who are having these experiences describe a kind of a haze or a mist, or sometimes they see it as a blue mist, something like that. So for him to describe that kind of haze in the air is kind of typical.
Wow. Yeah, he when he listens to this, maybe he'll finally get a few answers.
Well, I'd be delighted to talk to him personally.
Oh,
and again, I'll answer every email to ask@danshaw.com. I'll send you a free ebook. So feel free to reach out. It's how I do my vortex research. I do some of it right here from my desk by talking to people out in the field, people who have, intimate experience of their place.
Have you traveled abroad to investigate this as well, or is it pretty much in the U.S.?
I wish I could say I've traveled all over the world, but I haven't got too far past, like the UK and a bit of Europe and such. But indeed, I have had a chance to get down to Mexico and see some of the ancient monuments down there. And, of course, all over the United States, there are ancient monuments. People are generally relatively unaware of them for a number of reasons. But in America, we have a place called America's Stonehenge.
Yes.
New Hampshire, yeah. And all kinds of features in the New Hampshire landscape, stone chambers and stone arteries that look like they're not walls, but some people call them walls. But enigmatic stone features, ancient mounds, the mound building, so-called mound building cultures. And in my area of the Pacific Northwest, we also have some of these enigmatic stone features in the vicinity of Mount Shasta. and that environment, we find that there's these stone arteries, these stone constructions that they're clearly intentional for a number of reasons. They're similar to, but different than the so-called stone walls and features we find in the East. And so they're in your own backyard, whether you're aware of them or not. They may have been plowed over, or landowners might not be talking about them because they don't want people poking around and digging. Mm-hmm. But these ancient mysteries are just around the corner. You don't have to travel to some distant, you don't have to go to the Bermuda Triangle to experience a vortex. There's these points in your own hometown. If you've got a place where the two rivers are coming together, mm-hmm. and you are able to get all the way around that confluence, if you're able to experience the energies below the confluence, above the confluence, around the confluence, those are all going to be very different energies.
Yes, I've felt that in various, because I've traveled all over Canada, and I'm attracted to bodies of water, and I have sensed that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, the University of Wisconsin apparently has several native effigy mounds. Mm-hmm. So, there's, like you said, you don't have to leave your backyard to find a lot of these things.
Exactly right. Everywhere, the electromagnetic energy is unique. It's not the same anywhere. And as you travel from one kind of energy field to another, that's where you're most likely to experience the energy. It's almost like the fish doesn't know it's in water until it jumps out, let's say. Yeah. So that at the interface where the energy changes, I think that's where you're most likely to sense that energy, and everybody senses it in different ways. It may be a mountaintop, it may be a river, a lake, it might be an ancient site, it might be ore and mineral deposits. So there's every one of these things has its, let's say, its own medicine. Yeah.
Is there any place in the world that you would like to go research that you've heard of and you haven't had a chance to go to yet?
Yeah, well, pretty much every place. Right now, Nova Scotia is definitely calling me. I'd like to see the Bay of Fundy and the tides there.
It's beautiful there. I'm originally from New Brunswick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there are some geometries there in Nova Scotia, and some enigmatic sites, etc. So that's on my bucket list.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your next spot? Where's Sean? What comes to mind for you?
Oh, I would love to go to Egypt or Scotland. It's just I don't know why. I've just been drawn. Well, Scotland because that's on my father's side. That's where my grandfather was born, and I've never had the pleasure of being over across the pond, as they say. And Egypt, ancient Egypt always has fascinated me for whatever reason, ever since I'm a young girl.
Yep. Well, the pyramids in Mexico are a little closer, so.
Yes. I remember when I first heard that Mexico had pyramids, I always thought, when I was young, that it was only Egypt, because that's the only place that they ever used to speak about. So I thought that was very fascinating. And
then the more you learn, there's just pyramids and ancient monuments all over the world.
Really?
And not just pyramids everywhere. Sardinia, I mean, I could go on and on. China, everywhere. It's crazy. Huh. Italy, Malta, I think. I don't know.
Didn't know that.
They're everywhere. The more you dig into it, they're just everywhere. Yeah.
Fascinating. So we're just about at the end here. Is anything else? Any final thoughts?
I would say this might take some editing. I'm hesitating here for a second. Take two. Sometimes I say this. I have a bit of a catchphrase. I'm not sure if I want to go with it. What I'd like to achieve is kind of a through line for the whole talk, if I can, for the whole podcast, I try to kind of stay on same theme, so I don't want to introduce a whole new theme on it. So I kind of want to sum up,
Okay.
if I can.
Of course.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to ask these questions. I love your questions, and I always learn from questions, and I learn from hearing from people out in the field. So I will just say that I would invite your listeners, you and your listeners, to heighten your sensitivities as you go out into the world. Ponder what it might be like to see with electromagnetic eyes. You may feel separate from your place, but that would be a misperception, because the highest truth would be that you are not separate. You are in a relationship of unity with your place, and by connecting with your place, you can help to harmonize the place and to harmonize your own energy system.
And perhaps most people won't feel so disjointed.
There's a real truth slightly concealed in the word orient, because we think of orienting as finding our location, our place. And the word, of course, comes from the word for east. And in the modern day, we do orient ourselves really more to the north. But in the past, people oriented themselves to the east. So if you meditate on that throughout the day, and you consider where you are in relationship to your place, and that you are totally connected to your place, I think that will tend to bring much joy.
Well, I thank you so much, Dan, for being on the show. This topic is so fascinating to me.
Thank you so much for playing with me, Paranormal Cat.
And you take care.
Okay, you too. We'll be in close touch in the coming
days.
days.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye now.
Bye. Well, we've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of each other. And if you'd like to be on the show or have questions and comments, just drop me an email, paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Paranormal Heart would like to extend a special thank you to purpleplanet.com for supplying the music for the show. The views and opinions expressed on Paranormal Heart are those of the host and participants.